Oh my goodness guys, this latest chapter of My Hero Academia was insane on so many levels. Again guys, this story is only going to continue getting crazier and crazier, and so if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Plot Armor as we will be here with you for all the hype to come. With the previous chapter, we got to see a young Star in Stripe who, despite having such an absurdly capable quirk, couldn't help but be frustrated with her own utmost limitations when it came to powering herself up. The reasoning for which many would credit to her being a woman. However, her brothers in arms would dismiss such nonsense and instead promise to have her back in any areas her quirk lacks in. A genuine kindness and camaraderie that truly meant the world to her. Meanwhile, in the present, as Star fended off the villain by pulverizing him with her laser lance, the Tiamat missiles were on their way. The villain had figured out that Star was only stalling for time with something bigger in mind and was truly getting sick of the games. However, Star would ultimately release her hold over the villain and have her brothers take her place with the laser fire, as she placed a new rule on the missiles. As such, their trajectory was rerouted, as Star was then able to absolutely pulverize a seabed with an explosive punch to end it all. Yet unfortunately, the villain's gamble had paid off, as he had selectively used decay to burrow further beneath the surface as to evade the impact and subsequent fallout, only to then spring up with a horrifying lack of flesh, command the Nomu that had been mistaken to be him by the pilot to detonate like Lady Nagan, and proceed to close the distance between himself and the hero, all the while losing his mind at the thought of harnessing her power. With that being said, he was still extremely ravaged here, and so Star will be presented with a chance to end it all by crushing him along with the aircraft of one of her brothers. A tough decision that she ultimately decided against, as the villain would leap upwards and completely grip onto her face. But before we go any further, this video is sponsored by Blue Screen, a manga series available now on Manga Dex that follows Kaiu Chiyumi and his journey to become the greatest coder, all the while meeting new friends, facing tough opponents, and giving it his all as he rises to the top. Within are a whole lot of intense battles and even plenty of coding knowledge you can learn from. And you can head on over to the mangaka's Patreon page to receive early and exclusive chapters before anyone else. The creator is a fan of shonen anime and manga like all of us, and spends a crazy amount of time chasing their dreams here with this series, so best believe that every bit of support means the world. With a passion project like this, you can be closer to the production than you would elsewhere. So be sure to check out Blue Screen over on Manga Dex and support the series and its creator over on Patreon. Thanks again to Blue Screen for supporting the channel, but now onto the video. And with this latest chapter, we began from the perspective of the villain, as based on their thought process, it would seem that the all for one aspect was mostly in the driver's seat. He considered his own hatred, a hatred of how New Order and One for All were working together. Perhaps not directly, but the influence of these two incredible quirks was far-reaching and certainly known the world over. So much so that he had decided to have his friends overseas create disorder. That he'd done so to slow the progression and intervention of foreign powers potentially making their way to Japan, would doubly serve to allow him the chance to achieve completion and later obtain these two quirks for himself. And as far as he was concerned, One for All was the solidification of power itself. A power so mighty that it reduces anything it crashes into nothingness. That if such a power were to be used in tandem with New Order, it would very well mean the end of the world. And so with that, Star appearing here like she did, forcing herself into this conflict despite all the dangers, despite the hurdles that he had placed, it was an act of quote-unquote heroism that absolutely sickened him. Again, this was pretty much like skipping steps, as not only did they not have One for All, but their body was also incomplete, and so they didn't have much of a choice but to gamble here. However, it looked like the villain's gamble had paid off, as he had done it. He had successfully stolen New Order. But as he did, Star would issue a new rule that she would not decay. Now, the pilot whose life Star had refused to take could not believe it and was absolutely furious with her for not doing so, as they'd all begun rushing towards her and the villain. And I must say that if these soldiers do actually manage to survive this battle and get back home, I'm sure that they're going to have some major survivor's guilt for sure. Meanwhile, Star could only resist this decay so much as once more, modifications on herself had an upper threshold of capabilities and her physical enhancement could not go any further. Now the villain was absolutely elated, as one of the strongest quirks in the entire world was finally theirs to control, and it was all because of Star's foolishness. The villain sought to decay her body and steal her quirk simultaneously, and so Star simply could not resist both. Yet in attempting to protect her body from decay, she allowed her quirk to be taken, and with her quirk being taken, she would be vulnerable to decay. And from there, we would have even more deposition to the thoughts of the All-for-One will, which for me at least almost felt like forbidden knowledge. Here we would have him recalling his younger brother Yoichi Shigaraki as a child, enjoying a Captain Hero comic book. The very same storyline we had first heard about during Deku's first trip into the Vestige world. And with that, we would now learn that when he and his brother read that comic, it wasn't that he didn't know the story continued beyond the victory of the Dark Lord. He knew that there was more. He just chose to stop reading, which I think is pretty funny considering there are and will be those who drop even this series at a point of their choosing, perhaps when they feel satisfied and feel they can do without more. And as weird as it is to get these honest thoughts or even to delve into the actual thought process of All for One, this change, at least this narrative openness, could be accredited to the Shigaraki aspect being fused in as well. I mean, we know All for One to be a very petty individual, however, adding that Shigaraki emotional outpour into the mix will inevitably change things. But anyways, the villain would now try out their new power as they would begin to issue a new order, manipulating the atmosphere, as suddenly, within the Vestige world, stood Star. The conjoined consciousness looked back at her in shock. As in the real world, they would horrifically swell only to then violently explode all over internally. They were falling apart. Their many quirks were revolting and breaking down from within. This was Star's doing. She was playing the long game. She knew that Tiamat would not make it in time, and so she established this previously as a contingency of sorts. The rule that new order would revolt against the other quirks within, as we would see a hulking visage of Star begin to tear away at the fusion, as the overtaken wills of these many stolen quirks would arise and go insane. The All for One presence had not seen this turn of events coming and was infuriated, in a way we haven't exactly seen from him prior to this, which again may be accredited to the fusion of his emotional state with Shigaraki's. Star certainly knew the worst case scenario going into all this to begin with, that if it came down to it, her quirk would be stolen and her entire squadron would be wiped out. And truly she would have loved to have been able to defend her body too, but this was the sacrifice to be made. A true hero, down to her spirit, who truly believed that the thwarting of this global threat far exceeded the value of her own life, as she would then think back to her brothers, being especially grateful for all that they had done for her over the years. And in the real world, these pilots were hurting too, but physically, the villain was not in very good shape at all, as the quirks within them were at this point rebelling like crazy. The villain would then consider to themselves that quirks may either be taken or given, but never outright destroyed. Now, I'm of the belief that this is specifically in the case of All for One, as we do know the quirk destroying drug exists, so yeah, quirks can be destroyed, but in knowing that he can't just delete these quirks, the villain would think to momentarily transfer them to the approaching pilots. However, they would keep their distance and do their part by further bombarding him with laser fire. It was clear to them now that Star was fighting the fiend from within, and so they would not let up as they refused to let Star's sacrifice be in vain. As from within, New Order was tearing these quirks apart, and so the villain's Reflect quirk was being broken down as well, as New Order would continue to go crazy on them down to the tooth and nail. But as the real Star broke apart, she'd furthermore think about her hero, All Might, that thanks to him saving her when she was young, she was able to experience such a wonderful life as a hero, as she decay and fade away with a salute and a smile on her face. This was her way of paying All Might back for what he had done for her. And the villain was in a rather desperate situation here, as assistance from the Nomu would be desired. However, I'm not really sure how this thing is still around. I mean, it received all the beatings he was supposed to. It was held down by the laser fire and was hit with lasers constantly, and it actually got hit with Tiamat, so I don't see how this thing is alive. Not to mention, it was ordered to detonate, so how is this thing still here? I don't get it. I mean, at this point, we might as well call this thing true high-end, as it is way more resilient than any other that we've seen before. This thing is still kicking. But yeah, New Order, or as All For One put it, All Might's ghost, was giving them a run for their money, as laser fire would be unending, and that was the chapter. Wow. Okay, so I have a lot of mixed feelings with this one. On one hand, certainly a very cool play from Star and an interesting way to keep the battle raging on. America losing the #1 hero here is pretty crazy, but not all that unexpected. It's one of those things where plenty of us hoped the outcome would be different or subvert our expectations, but I am hesitant to believe that that is the case for most of us. My Hero Academia deaths, and at the very least major injuries, do in fact happen, but clearly not to anyone who wasn't designed with such a fate ahead of them from the jump. Perhaps Midnight may be considered an exception to this, but then again, with the war, some hero of note had to die to emphasize the severity of the situation, while also not being so major that would upset too many people and be debilitating. But now that Star is officially dead, we may want to ask the question, why did she exist to begin with the entirety of her screen time being encompassed within these 6 chapters? Well, as it is looking right now, to nerf the villain. And I hate this. I absolutely hate this. I won't even lie to you. I mean, anytime something is too powerful or has potential to be absurdly powerful, the brakes are pumped hard with this series. I mean, at this point, just about any game-changing quirk is bound to be nerfed or deleted. I mean, come on, Twice and his nation-toppling quirk, killed. Overhaul and his insta-kill Fingers of Death can't activate his quirk. Miruko, one of the greatest brawlers in the series, horribly injured, lost an arm. Eraserhead and his ability to suppress quirks, lost a leg, lost an eye. Gigantomachia, never straight up defeated, just put to sleep and forgotten. Mystic Compress, yet another one-touch killer, horribly injured, lost an arm. Crust, one of the top heroes, dies without even being much of a character at all. High-end Nomu, praised to be the pinnacle of quirk experimentation, and are each at top hero level with complete stabilization, all wiped out before ever getting there. Star, dead after her first outing before we can even see the quirk at its full potential, and now our main villain, it would seem, who at the point of this fight, stealing One for All aside, would mop the floor with Deku and all the heroes with ease. I love this series, but at this point I know very well to curb my enthusiasm whenever the crazy potential of something is dangled over our heads, because in the end, it will probably be reined in heavily. Poor Endeavor, Genist, and Hawks didn't even get to say hello. And she'll never get the chance to meet All Might's true successor Deku, but oh well. Now, to clear up what exactly is happening here, New Order is absolutely unusable. At the very least, it is unusable by anyone who already possesses a quirk. It is volatile, and because of this, the villain cannot use it to stop it from going crazy. Star caught him in a perpetual loop. Now, how exactly does the villain manage to get out of this? Because in some capacity, he will need to. Well, the original All For One is still around, so he could in theory pull off a quirk transplant of sorts, taking someone's quirk and replacing it with New Order. And I mostly just point to that guy because it may be difficult for this current fusion to pass off the quirk given the current state of their body. So I mean, at the very least, All For One and New Order can never be together. With that being said, given the fact that the original All For One was speaking to Spinner in regards to ascending to godhood, supporting Shigaraki, and divulging the necessity of procuring this quirk, it's possible that Spinner may be able to forego his whack quirk and actually take this godly one on, which I suppose would make the enemies more formidable without being unbeatable. And this whole Star and Stripe situation served to emphasize just how powerful and capable this villain fusion really is. I'll certainly reserve my complete judgment of all this until it's all out there, but as it currently stands, how it's looking, I'm kinda shaky. I don't really entirely know how to feel. But if nothing else, it is very visually exciting, and I am looking forward to actually seeing what ends up happening. In the comments, let us know how you guys are feeling about all this, and if you think that Star's play was the right one here. And we can of course continue the conversation over on Twitter and Instagram, and even our Discord server, which are all linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video and want to be here for more, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.